Merkel Media.
What does the goddamn line say, Tony?
Please do not use gendered language.
Then what? I'll be arrested, put in airport jail?
Well, you're going completely sideways, man.
It's a big club, and you ain't in it.
How dare you?
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
I'm Chris Hansen with Dave on NBC.
Jack Marius Tack Theratrix.
Hi, I'm Spartacus.
Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. Steven Seagal.
Sex offender guy.
I'm Keith Morris.
This is Muammar Gaddafi.
I'm Rick James, bitch.
Sorting through the lies.
The hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
We cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
And uncovering the centuries-long plan for world domination.
Learning about Cuba, having some food.
Let's talk about Chinese people.
Have you ever been in a Turkish prison? Swangles in Fort Lauderdale?
I have sent 6 of my Libyan missiles to blow up the Sears hardware department.
Nothing could be more fun than jumping off a cliff with 2 German bisexuals.
Oh, you English are so superior, aren't you?
Thank you, comrade.
And now, macroaggressions.
That's what assholes call it.
With your host,
Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you're about to get chlamydia.
Charlie Robinson.
Hey, Whitey, where's your hat?
You want to drop the blame on Charlie and say it's all Charlie's fault.
He was a retard.
I get some goddamn diuretic.
Welcome to Macroaggressions. I'm your host, Charlie Robinson. If you're watching us on Rockfin, Rumble, Fan.video, or you are listening wherever podcasts are served, thanks a million. We appreciate the support. We couldn't do it without you. Also, thanks to our sponsors. They make this happen. Legal Shield has been in business for half a century in the United States and Canada. They'll get you access to a high-powered attorney in your area for very cheap, $30 a month. It's $1 a day. They can knock out all of the things that you really need to get done, but probably don't want to do. Your last will and testament, power of attorney, financial power of attorney, medical directives, all those things that you got to have as an adult. You don't want to do it. You don't want to spend a couple grand on it, but you can knock that stuff out in your first month as a member of Legal Shield. So I'll tell you what you should do. Just think about it. Go to the website, don'tgetpushedaround.com. That's the place to do it. It's specific to our show, and just take a look. See what you think, because they've got all kinds of options there. There's all kinds of a la carte add-on features to this as well. So if you're somebody that runs a small business, but you don't have a legal department, good. You can use Legal Shield. They'll do all their stuff for you. If you carry a gun and you need specific kind of paperwork, they have that as well. If you're getting ready for trial, they have a pre-trial package where you can pre-buy hours. It's super affordable. I mean, hopefully you're not you're not up against some sort of trial. But if you are, Legal Shield is an option for you. If you've got speeding tickets, red light camera tickets, send all that stuff to your attorney. Your company wants you to sign some new weird employment agreement that stipulates that you will take some shots or whatever. I mean, just send it all to your attorney and let them sort it out. So go to don'tgetpushedaround.com is the place to go to find out more about Legal Shield. So check it out, see what you think. Also, big thanks to Tim James and the crew at Chemical Free Body. Their products work, period. I don't know how else to say it. In a world of scammy supplements that are filled with sawdust and don't do anything, Chemical Free Body's products actually work. That's just the best thing I can say about it. And I've been using it now from coming up on 4 years. I take Green 85 every single day. If you're familiar with athletic greens, you've seen it's similar to that. It's green. You mix it with water, you shake it all up, and you drink it. And it's less than 5 minutes. Doing that, if you do the detox bundle, which I'm currently on right now, it's probiotics, ultra enzymes, gut detox, and toxin detox, and they're all capsules. So you just take a handful of capsules while you're taking your Green 85, and you are done. And it will clean you out. I've done it before. It was kind of terrifying. It worked a little too well. But if you are so inclined, go to Chemical Free Body and use the chemicalfreebody.com and use the promo code MACRO on your way out to save yourself a little bit of money. And also, I'll be in Mexico February 11th through the 16th for in Acapulco, the 10th year anniversary, 2024. Come on out and see me. This is my open invitation to every single Macroaggressions listener. Get your ass to Acapulco, Mexico in February of 2024, and let's party. It's going to be amazing. I'm hosting the event this year, which is a huge, it's a big deal to me. I'm going to be I'm always enjoying my time there, and I always have a great time. This time around, I'll probably have a little bit more work going on. So if I see you there, come up and say hi and say what's up, and let's have a beer. So anarchapulco.com, promo code macro for that. Well, Macroaggressions will be undergoing some changes in the new year. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but just you'll see it. I promise that the audio intro isn't going to change. It may never change. It's too fucking good. I'm sorry. And from time to time, I get the only complaint I get, the only serious complaint I get about this show from people is that they don't like me taking the Lord's name in vain in the intro. And I say, you take that up with Winnebago, man. For those of you that are unfamiliar, go on YouTube and type Winnebago Man and listen to there's like a 7-minute, you'll understand where it's coming from. So I'm not changing the intro. I'm not taking it out. The fact that the guy says God damn it twice, I'm not taking it out. Sorry, deal with it or don't. I don't give a fuck. It's staying. He's staying. It's the best. But everything else is changing. TNT Radio has been a new thing for me. I don't know if you guys know or not, but for the last 8 months, I have been doing TNT Radio every Saturday morning. And that has now changed. That has evolved. They have gone from TNT Radio, which is just radio, to TNT Radio plus video, TNT Vision. And it's live stream now. And they approached me and said, would you like to move your show to the weekdays and have it be a Monday through Friday show? And I said yes. And then I found out what all that entailed, which was ripping my studio apart and adding lights and adding a 4K camera, and oh God, I mean, it almost put me in the nut house, I'm not going to lie. So these days, if you are so inclined, 2 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday at tntradio.live, you can find the Charlie Robinson Show. And where I go for an hour. I've got 2 interviews. You can check it out. You can listen to it. You can download it. It's live streaming on Rumble and TNT Radio's website, and also on YouTube. Though, man, I don't know what they're thinking trying to live stream this on YouTube. I mean, you have heard the things I talk about, right? By myself, I will get you kicked off of YouTube. But that's for them to figure out, I guess. I don't know. But TNT Radio has kind of forced me in a way, in a good way, to upgrade my equipment. So if you see new backgrounds and I'm coming to you in 4K, which may be a bit much, you'll know why. And of course, when the new year starts, we've got some other tricks up our sleeve. So it's been, we're almost at the 400th episode as well. It seems like a good time to make some changes and upgrade things and keep it fresh. So you will see in the new year what Macroaggressions looks like, and it's going to be fucking fantastic. Let me just tell you. All right, let's get into the topic at hand. And while I was, writing the Kissinger episode a couple of weeks ago, it reminded me of so many of the things that he had been involved in. All the criminality, the mass murders. And I say that Henry Kissinger is one of the worst people to live in the 20th century. I put him in the same category as Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin and Pol Pot and Mao Zedong. And the reason why I do that, and though I understand people may say, well, that might be getting ahead of yourself. Let me explain. Though Henry Kissinger was not a ruler of any of these countries, his decisions directly led to the deaths of millions of people. So he was at least Joseph Stalin and Pol Pot and Mao Zedong and Adolf Hitler had the balls to put their name on their genocides. Henry Kissinger was such a coward that he hid in the shadows and let everybody else take the blame for it. So I have zero respect for Henry Kissinger. He was not a statesman. But I started down that path of sort of rehashing his crimes against humanity. We talked about Southeast Asia and the dropping of napalm and Agent Orange and using cluster bombs and landmines. Oh, every single component illegal, doesn't matter. So, and it brought me down to reminding myself about what he did in South America as well. And so I want to talk about that because it's a topic I haven't gotten into. It's not because it's not important. It's not because it isn't relevant. It's just that I had to yell at the trans people first. I mean, forgive me, before I got into Operation Condor. But I've yelled at the trans people enough, and I will yell at them again as well because they're ridiculous lunatics that deserve to be yelled at and mocked. But for this one, this is let's just say that this might be one of the history classes I wish I had, but never did. Learning about the dirty wars of Operation Condor and what this really means and how it was tied to the American empire. And it's tempting to think, oh, well, it's a South American situation, so it's a South American problem caused by South American people. Well, yes and no. It certainly did happen in South America, more specifically what they call the cone. So Argentina and Chile down at the southern tip. But it wasn't limited to that, of course. It happened in Latin America as a whole, which included parts of Central America and, of course, all of South America. So, but we're really going to focus on Argentina and Chile because they were hit the hardest. That it had the highest death counts too, and of course I'm not trying to diminish anybody in Bolivia who was murdered under the Operation Condor program, but it's not where we're going to focus on this one. So I think that if you understand Operation Gladio, and we've done plenty of shows on Operation Gladio, whether it's I got my first taste of Operation Gladio sitting in a bar in Acapulco at 2:30 in the morning with Ole Damagard, and he's going over in excruciating detail how it worked and who was involved and what they were doing. And so as a refresher, Operation Gladio was the leave-behind force that the NATO put in Western Europe after World War II just to make sure, listen, we're leaving. The Russians have come, from the east towards the west. They've stopped in Germany. We've split Germany in half, right? We've split Berlin in half, and the Russians have stopped right there. But in the event that they continue moving towards the west, we need to have kind of a stay-behind force just in case, and that was Operation Gladio. And it wasn't an actual military so much as it was just guerrilla terrorist cells that were planted in mostly Italy and France and places like that, but not limited to it. So when you understand that NATO was running terrorist cells in Western Europe, when obviously they're not supposed to, and they'll tell you that mistakes were made, of course, but that's the reality. That's what they were doing. So think about Operation Gladio. And when we're talking about Operation Condor, because Operation Condor was essentially Gladio for South America, and it's maybe we should call it Operation Gladiole. I mean, I don't know, maybe, because it was Operation Condor was started in 1968. The United States decided to try to prevent Latin America from falling into the Soviet sphere of influence. This was at a time when we were just starting Vietnam, or we had been starting Vietnam in '68. It was kicking in pretty good, and there was this concept that the globalist, murderous warmongers were selling, which was the domino theory of communism, right? If one falls, then it's going to start this chain reaction. And then next thing you know, the entire region will be under Soviet control or Russian influence, or however you want to define it. It was not the case necessarily. It didn't matter because it was the justification that they used to get involved in these wars preemptively. And so they use this rationalization of, listen, South America, you let the Soviets take over and install communism in one of these countries, and the next thing you know, it's going to spread like a cancer. So that was their justification for this. Of course, it's all nonsense, we know, but that's the reason that that's what they sold to the general public, and that was the reason for Vietnam too. You have to stop the dominoes. If the communists take hold in Vietnam, it's only a matter of time before Cambodia and Laos fall under Soviet occupation. So you know what we have to do to them in order to prevent them and save them from this is we need to bomb the shit out of them, which is what Kissinger did by dropping as many bombs on Southeast Asia as all of World War II multiplied by 2. So this is psychopathic thinking, of course, but it pays to understand it, because then you see why we were in these wars. Then you understand why we were so concerned with what was going on in South America. Not because we actually care about South America staying free from communists so that the South American people are protected. We don't give a flying fuck about the South American people at all. The only reasons why America was concerned about South America falling under Soviet direction was because then we wouldn't be able to run our corporations out of there. Okay, and our banking, and we wouldn't be able to have this sort of undue influence over the Western Hemisphere if that were to happen. So this isn't some altruistic mission to save the South Americans from the dirty old Russians. This was protecting our corporations. This was protecting our racket, Washington, D.C.'s influence over this region. We don't want somebody else coming in and telling these people how to live. That's our job. That's the way they saw that. So they did this. They started Operation Condor in 1968. And what they did is they started infiltrating and destabilizing many countries in the region, installing leaders that were favorable to American political and banking interests. What a surprise, right? And look, let's not sugarcoat this, shall we? The United States used assassinations and terrorism in South America for a decade and a half, from 1968 until 1983, when it finally stopped. And the U.S. deep state was responsible for the planning, training, and financing of terrorism. It's just so hypocritical. If you're here in the United States and you listen to what your government says, we're fighting terror, we're fighting terrorism, we've got to fight the terrorists there or else we'll fight them here. Everybody's a domestic terrorist and all this. It's like, you guys are the actual terrorists. The American empire are the actual terrorists. You're the ones that were training and financing and planning and plotting and giving them the weapons to carry out actual terrorism. You're the terrorists. It's classic projection, but we know this. Okay, so President Johnson knew about this. Nixon knew about this. Ford knew about it. Carter was involved. Reagan was involved. They were all involved. Okay, there are no innocent people in the White House with relation to Operation Condor. It got all of them. It got all 5 of those, at least, the 5 presidents that were part of it over its 15 years in existence. They were all read in on it. There's no surprises. Unsurprisingly, though, it was the idea of our favorite villain, Henry Kissinger, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973, as Augusto Pinochet was being installed as the dictator of Chile, the exact same year. So the exact same year that Kissinger was winning the Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the war in Vietnam that didn't actually stop until 2 years later, he was simultaneously overthrowing the democratically elected president in Chile, Salvador Allende, and replacing him with Augusto Pinochet, who went on to murder 30,000 people, or disappear them, however you want to frame it. What's the difference? They never found them. So, what gives the United States the right to think that they can just go down to South America and stick their nose in everybody else's business? Well, I'll tell you what gives them the right to do that. Well, there is no right. But I'll tell you what gives them the justification to do this, and that's the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine put into American law that the United States has a right to intervene in any country within its, quote, sphere of influence, meaning the Western Hemisphere, which includes Central and South America. So as long, it's so ironic that they're like, we've got to prevent the Soviets from expanding their sphere of influence because that would be terrible. And it's like, yeah, but our Monroe Doctrine says that it is our justification, our right and justification to get involved in anything happening in the Western Hemisphere because it is part of our sphere of influence. You know what I mean? So it's just so fucking backwards, of course. So America was concerned with countries in Central and South America that were advocating for the nationalization of private industry, especially if American companies were involved there already, and there were plenty of them. And that any country that started talking about radical land reform was going to get some democracy dropped on them. Anybody that was talking about accepting any kind of Soviet aid during that time, you've got to keep in mind this is the late 60s, all of the 70s, and early 80s. So we're talking about some Cold War stuff here, talking about USA and Russia not getting along. At least that's the perception. So if you took anything from the Russians, Soviet Union, if you took anything from the Soviets during this time, America would consider you to be the enemy. And they would say, well, we've got to stop that before it starts to spread. And of course, this should go without saying, but if any country showed even the slightest bit of anti-Americanism, it was over for them. They would get regime changed immediately. The CIA would send a team down there that would start to destabilize you first politically, then economically, and then the next thing you know, if you didn't get on board with getting out of the race or agreeing to hand it over to some dictator that has gone through the School of the Americas, we'll get to that in a minute, then your plane blows up with you in it in your family. That's how it works. So all right. So that's sort of what would get you on America's shit list is if you did any of those things. If you wanted to say like, maybe we should, have some look at the land situation of our country differently. Maybe the poor people need to have a little bit more of a say in this, and we want to open up land ownership to them. That's a no-no. If you took Soviet aid, that definitely would get you put on the list, even if you're just slightly like sort of like, I don't know if we should support America this way. It's like, you better brace for impact, man, because it's coming. And the socialists that won, like Salvador Allende in Chile, that made Nixon and Kissinger very nervous because he was loved by the people. And, you can't have that. We can't have that. So I mentioned our School of the Americas. Have you heard of this? AKA Coup School. It's COUP, Coup School. This is where you go in order to learn how to overthrow governments. It's not exactly a course that you sign up for at your local community college, of course. You understand this. This happens at Fort Benning, Georgia, on an American Army base, and it was in full operation from 1946 until they closed it down in 2001. And it taught 60,000 Latin American military personnel about how to run your countries, how to run your militaries, what to tolerate, what not to tolerate, how to torture people. Okay? This was a bad place. This is where they taught the concept of Latin American domino theory of communism. This is where they indoctrinated these people. Hey, listen, man, if you don't get a hold of your people, of your citizens, this is what's going to happen, is that the Soviets are going to be in there, and next thing you know, they're going to be lining people up against the wall and shooting them. That's your job. You better line the right people up against the right wall and shoot them, or else it will be done to you. So this is what's going on. Now, it turned out, this coup school turned out leaders that ran countries like Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, El Salvador, Guatemala, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela. So it was very focused. They wanted Central and South America only. And when you got through this program, which ran for a better part of 55 years, you would be trained to handle just about anything. You'd be trained on how to deal with uprisings in your own countries. You'd be trained how to deal with assassination attempts against you, how to overthrow existing regimes and install yourself in there, and how to stay in power once you were installed, and how to run the media, and how to use the clergy, and how to what the relationship should be like with Wall Street, and how you're going to need the banks to finance all this, and what your relationship will be with the Vatican. Don't undersell that, because we're going to get to that in a little bit. So this was school for psychopaths. And such notable graduates, you may recognize the names. Augusto Pinochet, who was installed to run Chile in 1973, and Manuel Noriega, who ran cocaine from Panama and wound up dying in I think he's dead in an American supermax prison, and also Omar Trujillos, who rose to my knowledge. I came across General Omar Trujillos because of John Perkins' book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Now Omar Trujillos at some point refused to take the bribes, and he blew up in a plane with his family. So this is that's they teach you that at coup school as well, too. So he knew. And when Perkins said, listen, I told him, if you don't take this deal with me, they'll send the jackals, meaning the CIA kill squads. And he said, I know. Told Perkins, I know. And then in 1981, he blew up in a plane. This is it. So the School of the Americas, this school where they send everybody there, the way the United States looked at this was that they considered this to be teaching all of the 60,000 Latin American military personnel. They considered to be teaching them counterterrorism. You know what I mean? I would say it's just straight terrorism. It's not counterterrorism. Counterterrorism makes it sound as if you are the good guy and the bad guys are the terrorists and you're countering them. When they take you to School of the Americas and teach you how to destabilize your country from the inside, that's terrorism. When they show you how to make the car bombs, that's not counterterrorism. That's not, it's like the people that say oh, it's reverse racism. Reverse racism is racism. Counterterrorism in this particular instance is just terrorism. It's just your flavor of it. So this was a very integral part of Operation Condor as well, because they sent these high-ranking military personnel through this School of the Americas and taught them how to think, gave them skills on how to survive, how to thrive, how to network, and then, of course, made the connections with Wall Street and said, listen, think of it like this. Think of it like the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leaders program, but for military people in South and Central America. That's what School of the Americas was. Let's move on to Argentina. Argentina's dirty war. So what the United States actually wanted in South America were anti-communist dictatorships. They didn't want anti-communist democracies because that's too hard to control. What they really want is dictators, but they want dictators that will do what they want them to do. That's the difference. So America throws up their arms and clutches their pearls, and there's talks about, oh, Saddam Hussein is a ruthless dictator. Muammar Gaddafi is a ruthless dictator. You love dictators. It's just that those dictators didn't want to play ball with you anymore. That's why you had them murdered, right? So it's not so much that America is against dictators. They're just against dictators that they can't control. And so what they really wanted in South America were anti-communist dictators that they could control. And that's exactly what they got in Argentina. And General Jorge Videla was put in charge, and Juan Perón was removed. And so General Jorge Videla was a graduate of the School of the Americas. He was somebody that they had groomed and trained for this purpose, and they installed him. So once Argentina was under junta control through the CIA, Vatican, Henry Kissinger, Wall Street, who supported this Videla guy, Then phase 2 happens, and that's when the death squads were unleashed, right? That's when the death squads were unleashed in Argentina in a big way. More so there than Chile, though I don't want to discount the deaths in Chile. And we'll get to that too in the second part of the show. So once Videla was installed and once the death squads were unleashed, the 30,000 people were murdered and another 30,000 were, quote, disappeared. That's a term that they came up with them in just the next few years. And hundreds of thousands of Argentinians were imprisoned at this time as well. So death squads, 30,000 murdered, that's pretty straightforward. What does disappeared mean? Well, it means different things depending on the people. Some of them were some of them were straight up kidnapped and held hostage and returned every now and then, depending on the circumstances. Most of them were disappeared, meaning they were never found again. The tactics that this particular regime used were fucking barbaric. We'll just put it that way, and a really horrifying way to go. So what they would do is they would load people up into helicopters and they would fly the helicopters up as high as they could and they would fly them over a body of water, be that a lake or ocean or whatever, and they would throw the people out of the helicopters. That's what they did. They had a term for it. Yeah. So it was bad. And it was rampant and it was indiscriminate too. It kind of takes you back to that, back to like Cambodia and Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot and that whole thing where they were murdering so many people in Cambodia, and they murdered 25% of the population, that they weren't even really sure who was the bad people that they were supposed, who were their enemies that they needed to cleanse from the country. So, they were looking for academics, they were looking for people that were intelligent, and those were the people that were getting killed. But then in Cambodia, they just got to a point where they just said, anybody wearing glasses, you look smart, you're wearing glasses, so let's kill you, right? So in Argentina, it wasn't quite like that because they didn't murder 25% of the population, but it was like, oh, you're a professor, you must be teaching something that goes against the new military rule, so we're going to shoot you, or we're going to just take you out and take you on a helicopter ride or whatever. And it wasn't limited to men. They threw women and children out too. They didn't give a fuck. They kill everybody. So this is what happens. And that is done for a variety of reasons. First, dead people don't get in your way anymore. But also, the word gets out. You can control 1 million people by killing 10,000 people by throwing them out of helicopters. You know what I mean? It sort of has that effect. I'm not going to say what I was thinking of saying because I might take a helicopter ride. So you understand that once the military guys are installed, then the murdering, the rounding up, the imprisonment, all of that starts. And that happens quickly. And most of the killings in Argentina happened within the first couple of years, most of the disappearances as well. It wasn't until, it lasted until 83, but it wasn't, but most of this was going on in when he took power in 76. So 76, 77, 78, in those first 3 years, that's when a lot of the killings. And then listen, not that you would ever stop killing if you're a bloodthirsty killer, but point is, if you've thrown a bunch of people out of helicopters, you don't have to kill as many people after that because the message is sent. So, listen, it's a dirty business. But let's talk about the business behind the war a little bit, because once the dictatorship was operational, then the controlled demolition of Argentina began. And this was a playbook that was used not just in Argentina, but also in Chile. In Argentina, Jose Alfredo Martinez de Hoz was installed as the Minister of Economy at the direction of... Who would install the Minister of Economy into Argentina, of all places? Would it be the head of Argentina? Would it be the head of the military? Or they say no? I'll tell you who installed Jose Alfredo Martinez de Hoz as the Minister of the Economy, that was David Rockefeller. That's who installed him. And then they set about to install a neoliberal macroeconomic policy package, which was adopted by Argentina, identical to the one that was adopted by Chile. What a surprise. In which Chile's was put in place 3 years earlier in 1973. This economic package went in 1976, right after the military was installed, right after there was the regime change in Argentina. So one of the first things you do after you take control of the country is then you take control of the finances of the country. And this policy package meant price controls and wage freezing. And this went into effect immediately, and it destroyed the purchasing power by 30% in the country of Argentina in just 90 days. 90 days, your Argentinian peso was worth 30% less than it was 3 months earlier. The central bank in Argentina was then taken over by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. I will remind you that the International Monetary Fund falls underneath the United Nations, and that United Nations was started by David fucking Rockefeller, of course. So when I say that David Rockefeller picks who the Minister of Economy is going to be in Argentina, I'm not kidding. And when I say that the IMF comes in to take over the central bank, I'm not kidding about that either. That's exactly what happened. And then Wall Street came in as well, because we are talking about IMF and we're talking about David Rockefeller. So, of course, we're talking about Wall Street. And Wall Street came in and immediately loaded Argentina up with a massive amount of debt until the country went bankrupt. Banker wars, always and in all ways. Okay. This is to be expected. Whenever you see a physical war, an outright regime change op in which a military leader is installed and the killing start and the rounding up starts, what you should also be looking for is, and just understand, there might be a military coup going on in that country. There's also a financial coup happening at the same time. And in fact, the military coup is only happening because the financial coup needs that in order to take over the country. And that's exactly what happened. And Argentina has always had an unstable currency, in part because of that. So who is in charge? Admiral Emilio Eduardo Massera was in charge of Argentina, essentially, and his handlers, who included David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, the CIA, and various Wall Street banks. That's who was really running Argentina in the mid to late 70s. So this Admiral Emilio Eduardo Massera was responsible for running something called the Navy School of Mechanics. The Navy School of Mechanics kind of reminds me of the School of the Americas. It's sort of an offshoot of that, but this was located in Argentina. It was run by the Argentine government at the behest of the guy who was in charge of it all, Admiral Massera. And this was a U.S.-sponsored torture factory. So if you want to think of like Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq and Homan Square in Chicago all combined. That's what this place was. So if you got on the wrong side of the government, they would send you to the Navy School of Mechanics, where you would be tortured. And they sent nuns there, they sent priests there, they sent women, they sent men, they sent military men, they sent children, they sent anybody that got on the wrong side of them that they wanted to torture, most of the time to death, but not always. They would send them to the Navy School of Mechanics. And that was, of course, financed, built, and I don't know if it was technically operated by the United States, but of course they received all of the training from the United States. We're just the absolute worst when it comes to this stuff. It's so disgusting. But let's talk about something that doesn't get a ton of play, and that is the role of the Vatican in Argentina's dirty war. And it cannot be overstated how much they were involved. Now, the best way to describe Operation Condor which encompassed all of South America, would be to call it a joint venture between the CIA, the Vatican, and Wall Street. Okay, that's the best way I could possibly describe this. You've got the intelligence component, you've got the religious component, you've got the financial component here. Do you know about the controversy with Pope Francis? Have you heard a little bit about that he might have been involved in some nefarious activities back in Argentina back in the 70s and early 80s? Well, I'm here to tell you that he most definitely was. He was not some priest that was going along to get along or whatever. He was in it. He was in it in a deep way. Pope Francis was once known as Jorge Bergoglio, and he was so deeply involved in it. This is why he was elevated. This is why he is a guy. You have to understand, the Vatican is a criminal enterprise, and he was showing the Vatican. This was his audition reel. How can you be involved and keep control of this country of Argentina, where he's from? Can you keep control of it? And during the Dirty War, can you make sure that the church has a seat at the table for this decision making? Because there's going to be regime changes, there's going to be murders. We need you to not get all like religious about these murders, right? They're going to happen regardless. We're going to need you to manage this. We're going to need you to manage the churches. We're going to need you to get the churches on board with this. And hey, listen, if there are some people in your church that aren't getting on board with this, it is your duty, Jorge Bergoglio, soon to be future pope, it is your duty and obligation to make them get on board with this. And we'll leave it up to you how you determine that. So was he involved in kidnappings and tortures? Of course he was. 100%. He was directly responsible for the kidnapping, tortures, and murders of 6 people. Okay. The kidnappings of 6 people. I don't know. I think 2 of them were murdered and 4 of them were released, but it was, or 4 of them were murdered and 2 of them were released. So I might have that backwards, but it doesn't matter, because listen, if you're shooting nuns, if you're having nuns executed, which they were, and you're the lead Jesuit there, you're the head of you're the top of the food chain of the highest ranking Jesuit in Argentina was Jorge Bergoglio. You're guilty, man. You should be taken away in handcuffs, among other things. So he was the highest ranking Jesuit in Argentina during the genocidal mass murders from 1976 until 1983. Okay. He was personally responsible for the disappearance of 6 people. Okay. He ordered the kidnappings and torture of priests. Jorge Bergoglio did this. He ordered the kidnapping. This is not speculation. This is documented, provable. Okay. It's the reason why he doesn't want to get inside to a courtroom. It's the reason why he's pled the equivalent of pleading the Fifth Amendment to not testify against yourself. It's why when he was in court a decade ago for things surrounding this, he was extremely evasive. He wouldn't talk about anything. He's a wanted man. He's wanted for war crimes, and he was deeply involved in this. He was involved in the death squads that were running in Argentina. I don't know. Are you familiar? I mean, if you want to put it in World War II, comparisons, if you're familiar with the Einsatzgruppen for the Nazis, they were set up into groups of I don't know, 4 groups: Einsatzgruppen A, B, C, and D. 1,100 people in each group, and they were responsible for they were the cleanup squad. Once the Nazis would take over a city, then they would send in, they would blitzkrieg through it and destabilize things, and then the Einsatzgruppen would come behind them, and that was the death squads. They were the ones that would grab, the 2,000 men and take them out into the woods, into where the ditches were, and just shoot them. So this is what was going on in Argentina as well. The death squads there. They just didn't have a fancy German scary name for it like they did in World War II. But Jorge Bergoglio was involved in that too. Okay. So he's and it wasn't just Catholic priests that opposed Argentina's military rule that were shot. It was trade unionists. It was professors. It was a lot like World War II, So, all right, so let's wrap up Argentina so we can move on to Chile. Let's not forget about the role of the massive Nazi population in Argentina as well, right? It's not a joke that a lot of the Nazis fled to Argentina after World War II. And you can find cities like Bariloche in Argentina, where you walk into a bar and you're like, holy fucking shit, they've got like a big swastika going on in here. I know people that have been to Bariloche and they said, like, you walk down the streets and everything's cool. And then someone's like, oh, you want to go to this bar? And you go into this bar and it's like an entire wall filled with like a gigantic Nazi flag. And you're like, where am I? So the Nazis were in Argentina for a very long time. They offered their expertise with the killings during the Dirty War. Of course, they were involved in it in a not as much as the CIA was. But, listen, the CIA, if they talk about, oh, there's Nazis in Argentina, we should go root them out. You fucking worked with them during Operation Condor. Shut up. Stop pretending like we don't know what's really going on here. And so the leader of the Dirty War, in the end, General Jorge Videla, was sentenced to life in prison. He wound up dying in 2013. That's just like Manuel Noriega. That maybe they were in the same graduating class from coup school. I don't know. Maybe it never ends well. I'll tell you. When they put you through the school and then install you as the leader, you always end up either in a prison cell or hanging someplace. Let's move on to Chile. Chile was a horrible place during this time. They started on this sooner. Argentina started in 76. Chile started in 73. And when the CIA installed Augusto Pinochet, after they disagreed with the people of Chile who voted for socialist Salvador Allende as the president. But how they got Allende out of the presidency in Chile was not by blowing him up, which you might have thought would have been, maybe the easy way to do it. That's a little too on the nose after he just got elected by all the people and they were like, oh, we love him. So instead what they did was that the banks on Wall Street just turned off all of his lines of credit and he went out of business. That's essentially how they did it with him. So when you've got no credit for your country, then your country starts to fall apart. And then they said, well, we've got a guy who's got good credit with us. His name is Augusto Pinochet. We just brought him out of the School of the Americas, and we think he'd be fantastic for this position. In fact, we're not auditioning for the position. We're telling you he's the new president. So he was installed by the people that supported him, very much hardcore right-wing American organizations like Les Cercle. They were deeply involved in that. The CIA, the Rockefeller-Kissinger consortium was involved in this. Ted Shackley had a seat at the table. The National Security Council was involved in the installation of Pinochet. Wall Street had a say in it. The Vatican had a say in it. So there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it came to Chile. And they installed Augusto Pinochet and gave his people the same economic playbook that they would later, 3 years later, they would give to Argentina to destroy their own country from within through currency debasement, which is, of course, what happened in Chile, right? So the bankers this is one of the key components for these wars, is that the banks want access to the natural resources of the countries. And that, like I said, one surefire way to get yourself like on the wrong side of these globalist lunatics is to start privatizing land or nationalizing corporations, like nationalizing the oil and gas industry in your country and saying, well, yeah, I understand that Texaco and Standard Oil and all these people are already here drilling for oil in our country, but I've made the decision that we're going to nationalize the oil industry. So you guys are all out of business. Get the fuck out. We're going to take it from here. Now, if you do that, you better have an army because they're coming back for you. Because the Wall Street people will get the CIA to overthrow you if you start to mess with their financial incentives and what they've got going on in this country. So again, the banks see a place like Chile and Argentina. They say the first thing we have to do is go in and destroy their economy from the inside by debasing their currency. So we're going to install our guy, and our guy's going to install this package of this economic package, which is essentially economic suicide for their country, but he's going to install it because we installed him, and that's part of the plan. That's what we were taught at School of the Americas. So you go in there and enforce this economic package on your people, which cripples them, puts them all into poverty, and then the banks then rebuild the country in their image. They get you dependent on the petrodollar. They get you dependent on them for lines of credit, and then they buy up all of your industries at pennies on the dollar, and have their guy in charge of determining who gets the rights to drill where and run that, who gets access to all this lumber, or who gets the fishing industry, or who gets the oil industry, or who gets to mine for cobalt, or who gets to mine for lithium, or whatever, right? So when you hear about these countries nowadays saying, when you hear like Chile has this massive amount of lithium deposits, and that they, and that they want to nationalize it and take control over it, like, okay, I understand why you would want to do that, but just understand this: whoever is backing the lithium industry is going to come for you because they want their companies in there mining this. So this is sort of the how this plays in today's society, is that a lot of it is it's the same play. It's the same playbook, right? It's like we want access to your raw materials. Just take you back to John Perkins' Confessions of an Economic Hitman. We want access to your raw materials. We want access to your labor, maybe. We want access to your facilities for manufacturing or whatnot. And we're going to take over your country from the inside with our installed guy, destroy it first, just to make sure that you guys have nothing going on there. And then we'll come in and we'll build it back with our financial infrastructure and all of our American-tied corporations, and we'll build it back and we'll make a fortune off of it. So that's how it goes. And that's the reason why there were so many cooks in the kitchen with regard to Augusto Pinochet. Why you've got not just the CIA, which you would expect, of course, but why you've got Rockefellers and Kissingers sniffing around on the outsides, and why you've got Wall Street, and why you've got the Vatican. The Vatican's there to manage this as well, although the Vatican's role in Chile wasn't quite as involved as it was in Argentina. In Argentina, the Vatican was just running roughshod over their religious component. Whereas in Chile, the priests actually stood up for a lot of the people. This is part of the reason why there weren't as many murders in Chile as there were in Argentina. In Argentina, the priests were picking out the people to get murdered. The Jesuit priests were like, this guy, that guy, that guy. You take them all off and do whatever you need to do with them. But in Chile, the priests were saying, don't do that. You can't do that to these people. This is terrible. But the Vatican still had a role in this. And so while all these economic handcuffs were being applied, Pinochet was making a fortune running cocaine. So that's something that doesn't get talked about too much. He was deeply involved in the European trafficking ring of cocaine, and a portion of the profits that were coming from this cocaine running were going to lay Cerkel's little war that they were starting in Nicaragua under Ronald Reagan, and with their group called the Contras. So now you get into the Iran-Contra affair that involved Ollie North and Ronald Reagan and all the and the CIA running drugs to finance this. Well, yes, the CIA was running drugs to finance Iran-Contra and to sell cocaine and use the proceeds from that to finance the Contras in Nicaragua. Well, they were also getting financed by a different cocaine trafficking network, which was running out of Europe, that the CIA was also sort of involved in, but Augusto Pinochet was running that out of Chile. So, and using that money to also finance the Contras. So, I mean, the Contras were an entire operation purely financed by the sale of cocaine. Everything they can. It wasn't only the CIA doing it. It was also CIA connected organizations, countries in South America that were deeply involved in it as well. So about 30,000 people were tortured in Chile, and upwards of about 5,000 were killed. I mean, given some of the numbers we've thrown around with regard to Kissinger's involvement in places like Southeast Asia and East Timor, and obviously the Middle East and parts in Africa and Argentina, 5,000 dead people sounds like a rounding error. But listen, if it would happen to your family, it would have been it would have been worse, and it would have been a lot worse if the priest class in Chile had acted more like the priest class that was led by Bergoglio in Argentina. If they had been on board in the same way, that 5,000 number would have looked more like the 30,000 number that was going on in Argentina. But for what it's worth, they stepped in and pushed back against that and made it more difficult for the murderers to. Now, again, 30,000 people being tortured is crazy. Okay. That's that's a baseball stadium filled with people. Okay. It's a lot of people to be taken out and tortured, psychologically tortured, physically tortured, kidnapped, held for ransom, all those things. And in 1974, September 3rd, to be exact, in Washington, D.C., Operation Condor took off on U.S. soil when General Carlos Prats and his wife were murdered in a car bomb in Washington, D.C. So one of the Chilean generals didn't get blown up in a car bomb in Santiago. He got blown up in a car bomb in Washington, D.C., which I think sort of got on the radar of a lot of people. So Operation Condor doesn't get talked about a ton. It's worth knowing about, like I said, because it's got those similarities with Operation Gladio. It's got a lot of the same fingerprints, a lot of the same tactics, not identical, of course, but similarities. And these leave behind armies, and America has found that it might be better to take less of an overt role as the front man, but just be the behind the scenes support staff, be the support staff that provides money, logistics, training, information, all of this, in order to make sure that when they install somebody like Augusto Pinochet or whoever, that person knows that person is the face of it. That person is known to be running it, though running it is it's never really that guy. It's always somebody. But you can look at Zelensky as a prime example of this, right? Zelensky is the face of the Ukraine war, but nobody really thinks he's actually running it, right? We all know who's running that. That NATO and the US and the Brits are behind that. So that's kind of how I think about this with a lot of the people in South America and Central America that wound up participating in this Operation Condor. Listen, Bolivia, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay had murders as well. I don't want to pretend as though the deaths there were inconsequential, because of course they were, but it wasn't like there weren't helicopter rides there. You know what I mean? And once you've got a tactic that is sort of used so much that they come up they come up with a term for it, like a nickname for it, and I forget exactly what it was, but there were some nicknames like airplane rides or something like that. If somebody was mentioned that term, everyone was like, "Oh, we know what you're talking about." So that didn't happen so much in these other countries, but I think that the influence of the CIA never goes away. Operation Condor may be dormant now, right? Or it may come back in some other form or fashion, much like Gladio. But in the grand totals, if we're going to count this all up, Operation Condor, about 50,000 people were murdered, 30,000 were disappeared, and 400,000 were arrested. And I would say arrested / tortured, because that's some form of torture. And so we're talking about look, I mean, South America is I think the least populous well, if you take Australia, but I mean, it's one of the, it's not as highly densely populated as a place like Southeast Asia. So to get these sort of numbers in South America, and really, let's be honest, I mean, we're really focusing on two countries, Chile and Argentina, that took the brunt of this. These are substantial numbers. 50,000 people dead is a lot. 400,000 people arrested and tortured. That is filling the Rose Bowl 4 times with those people. That should never happen. But I felt like we needed to get into it, in part because of my Kissinger work recently. It reminded me of what a horrible scumbag that guy is and how he just seems to be involved in everything. So yeah, Operation Gladiole, terrible, but also not very surprising. If you like this episode, you can take the additional step right now of sharing it with your friends and family. You can follow me on Twitter at Macroaggressions, or you can go to the website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you again soon.